Welcome to Let's Thrive Postpartum.
Welcome back to Let's Thrive Postpartum. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Ashley.
Ashley, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, it's been an interesting couple of days in our house. I think lots of big feelings all around with kids, me, my husband. I think we're starting just to feel a bit of the squeeze of some of the stresses going on, like in kid life, parent life, the world. Yeah.
It is the same on our side. It just seems January was a rough month. There was sickness, there was life, there was things happening in the world outside of us. It was a lot.
Yeah.
So Ashley, today, could we talk about, as a mom, pregnant, you have kids, you're just a person listening who is like, wow, things are hard. What do we do as a parent when things are hard? Not only to help us, to help our child, but even if you're struggling kind of mentally and don't feel great, you've got depression, all the things that come on with, new motherhood, things can feel really, really hard.
Yeah.
Can we talk through today some ways of what to do and what you recommend from a therapy side? How to kind of manage and mitigate and make all of this not feel so hard.
Yeah.
Man, 2025.
Because it's hard. I know. And I think that's part of like sort of step one is being able just to say, it feels really hard right now.
It does.
Not trying to pretend, right? And kind of like lying to yourself or other people that, oh, everything's fine and we're okay. It's good. Sometimes you just have to be honest and be like, no, it's hard. It's hard right now. And so, yeah, like my life right now feels hard.
It does. And I feel like, the depression and all the stuff that we've talked about that we've all been through, that's kind of gone. But then life is hard right now. You've got different stages of different hardness.
Yeah.
And my perspective, what you just said is so true. Because when I was able to finally say, this is hard, it kind of releases a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Right, from inside of you. But also it lets other people know, like, maybe there's help that is needed.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I think that's like that necessary step is just being honest. Because you're going to have no reason to like seek help or to do anything different or try something new, like in your family or with your kids, if you're trying to convince yourself that everything's fine. Like then there's no reason to do anything different. So you're going to stay
Good
stuck,
point.
Yeah. So it's one of those things you kind of first have to be like, well, this is hard, so that our brain has a reason to say, okay, well, what are we going to do about it?
I love that. And so if you're listening and you're in a moment of where like life is hard right now, I think getting to say out loud, this is hard, would help. Take a second. Because man, this is hard.
Yeah, it's hard. That's okay.
It's also, Ashley, can be hard for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do if your kid's having a hard day? Let's start there. Like we've all been there, toddler, teenage. Sometimes they can have really hard moments and hard days.
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
Well, I think one of the hardest things, and I mean, this is for me as a parent too, is like trying to remember in those moments, right? When our kids are having a tantrum or when they're what we would call overreacting or they're having some really big feeling, is to remember like that they're not robots and that they are allowed to have good and bad days, right? Like we know as adults, we have good and bad days based on how we slept or what somebody said to us and all these things. And kids are the same way, but their kind of tolerance is even so much smaller than ours is. And so sometimes it's just trying to remember to like kind of try and access that empathy that's somewhere inside of you. That is like, my kid they're really probably not doing any of this on purpose. They seem to be having a really hard time, and get curious and be like, why is that? Like, what could be going on that is caused this reaction? Because it is not, their brain is not going, I'm trying to make my mom's life miserable right now, so I'm going to do this, right? That's like, no kid does that. And so it's trying to remember first of like, because if you can reframe it to yourself of looking at it with curiosity, some empathy, that's going to change what you say to them in those hard moments, right?
Yeah, because it's very easy to, especially sometimes I'm one of those moms, you can get overwhelmed and suddenly in
Mhm.
those hard moments, you're not as logical, you're a little bit more emotional. So being able to
Sure.
say what's happening versus this is a reflection on me or this is never gonna get better,
Yeah.
I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah, and even just I mean, there's days where my initial reaction is like, "Oh my gosh, like, I've asked you to do this 10 times, like, why can't you just listen to me?" Right? Which does nothing to help my kids calm down. That does
No.
nothing. That fans the flames of their, like, frustration. So if I'm able in those moments to be like, "Okay, like, they're not doing this on purpose. What else could be going on?" That would then sometimes, not every time, but sometimes allows me to say like, "Hey, this is taking a lot longer than it normally does. Like, what's going on? Why does this feel so hard? Why does it feel so hard to put your shoes on?" And some days they're like, "Well, I really don't want to go to school, or yesterday so and so said da 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 to me and I really don't want to go to school today." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I really can empathize with that, right? Like, I understand, like, that's really tough. Thank you for telling me. However, we're going to be late and I'm going to help you get your shoes on and get out the door, right?" So, how we kind of look at the situation with our kids can influence if are we going to say something that is helpful and calming, or are we going to say something and engage in a way that makes it bigger. And a lot of times adults unintentionally we choose to say things that make the conflict worse.
We do. I think a lot of it is putting ourselves or what we think should be happening on top of that.
Yeah.
We can make things worse. So if we're making things worse,
Yeah.
any ideas of what we could do if the talking through it doesn't help, or if you've talked through it, but you're still just like, man, this is hard.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things to do is, if morning's been hard and drop off is kind of hard, and I'm like, okay, none of this felt really great that morning, right? I
Yeah.
feel like I was upset with my kid was upset with me. It doesn't feel good. It feels like kind of our connection has been sort of eroded or sort of like frayed a little bit. And so then I try and think of, okay, well, this afternoon when I see them or this evening, maybe we could do something that rebuilds that connection. So that might
Okay.
be like, going to a park when normally I would say, no, we're just going to go home, or playing a game with them when normally I would be like, no, mommy needs to like finish up some emails, like you guys go play, or sometimes stopping and getting ice cream. I also love ice cream. So it puts me in a great mood.
Helps both people,
Yeah.
mom and child.
Yeah. Like anything that rebuilds that connection between you and your kid, I think is helpful in those moments just to get everybody back on a page of like, we're good. Like we love each other, we care about each other, and like we can still have fun together. Cause I need that reminder sometimes is like we have fun together. And I know my kid needs the reminder sometimes, like my mom can be fun, or like my mom is,
Yes, because it can be so hard to be stuck in the mundane day to day. We've got to get
Yeah.
things done. Remembering they're a kid and they want to have fun and they love you and want to have fun with you.
Yeah.
I think it's such a great thing that I should probably remember in those bad moments. Okay, what can we do fun next
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
everybody?
Just something that feels good, right? And
Yeah.
that I mean, it's silly. It could be, I don't know, like anything that feels fun for you and your family. And everybody needs to feel good about it, right? Like don't pick something that your kids love but you actually despise doing, because then they're going to know. So like do something that you actually like everybody really finds a little bit of enjoyment in, because the goal is like rebuilding the connection that you have with them, not just to do something that makes them happy.
I love that. So, Ashley, let me ask you this. So, what if in those hard moments, it's not your kid? What if in those hard moments, it is you? Life is happening. There are things changing. Maybe there are things out of your control. Maybe it's relationships or the depression or the mental health part. If those hard moments you can say are me, what do you
Mhm.
do then?
Well, good question, Kelly.
Right? Because you still want to be a good parent, most of us, and you want to
Yeah.
do things and you want to that. But we
Yeah.
all go through times where the day or the time or whatever is just
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I think there, if you're able to access kind of like some self awareness, right? Like,
Okay.
I am having a hard time because these things that are outside of me, like that are going in life, are really affecting me, right? It could be anything, family stuff, world stuff, like bad day, stuff at work. All kinds of things can affect like us and cause us to have a bad day or a hard moment. And if we're able to first recognize that and remind ourselves, like, I need to try and not like take this out on my kid, right? And most of the time though, we do, right? Just in the same
Yeah.
way that our kids take it out on us when they're having a hard day, we often project it onto our kids when we're having a hard day. We have less patience. We might be more snappy. We're kind of like, rushing more, and we say things that we're like, shouldn't have said that. And so if you can get a little bit of that self-awareness, you are able in some of those moments to you can backtrack, right? I tell parents all the time, and I have to do it myself. Like some days you just have to say, I shouldn't have said that. Or
Okay.
I know my first reaction was no, but I thought about it for a couple of minutes, and actually like it's totally fine if you guys want to go dig in the dirt. It's okay. Right? Sometimes we say no because we're kind of like trying to get our grip on the control of our lives. And so a little bit of you can take back things that you've said if you realize you didn't mean them. You also though can kind of clue your kids in to the fact that you're having a hard day.
Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah. So we don't need to give kids, of course, they don't need details on certain things, but it is perfectly fine. And it'd be nice. It's a good lesson for kids to help them build their own self-awareness. If you can say, like, mommy's had a really hard week. There's been a lot of hard stuff in my life going on. And I think it's made me not so patient at home. Right. Or I
Okay.
think that you can say, like, I think I've let some stuff that's been going on affect, like, I haven't really wanted to play as much with you this week. And you can just as a statement, right? So
Mhm.
that because kids are sponges and like the greatest observers in the world, and they know like when our moods are off or when we change, how we kind of interact and talk to them, like they pick up on it, but they don't understand it, right? Like your 5-year-old or your 3-year-old or whoever has no idea that like, oh, maybe this situation going on over here is affecting my parents. And then that's probably why mommy's been a little mean lately. And, they don't know that. They're just like, huh, mommy's talking differently. Right. Or like,
Yeah, or mommy's
play
not
with
nice
me
to
too
me.
much.
Yeah.
So they know it. And that doesn't feel good. Right.
Mhm.
Again, as adults, like we can empathize that a kid, they notice a change in their parent that doesn't feel good. They're kind of going to be like, they're just going to be confused. Right. Because they have no context. They don't understand it. So we can give them a little bit of context and we can say, like, I'm having a hard week. And it's probably, say it in words that make sense to them. Like, I know, like, I haven't wanted to play as much, or I haven't been as patient, or maybe I've said things in a way that maybe sound a little more mean. And you can say, like, and that's not fair because it really, like, it doesn't have anything to do with you. This is all stuff that's going on in mommy's life. But that, like, little bits of clarity like that feel really, really good for kids because it just helps a little bit clear up some of the confusion that they're
I
experiencing.
I love that because I think we've all worked kids ourselves. You do notice when things aren't right, and so knowing it's not you and it's something with mommy or daddy
Yeah.
is a great thing to say, "I didn't do anything wrong. I'm safe," right? All
Yeah.
the things of, "It's okay. This will pass."
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is kids are like just naturally, they're very self-centered in a sense of like they do take on the blame for
Mhm.
a lot of things because for them, like biologically, what else, like, they're not going to blame a parent, right? The person who is in charge of like taking care of them. That's not like a concept that their brain can wrap their heads around that somebody would intentionally or whatever do something to me. So most kids, they internalize it and they are like, well, I must have done something. Like I must have caused this or I must have caused that. You see it all the time, like when parents get divorced or when there's stuff going on
Yeah.
and kids will always like to some degree take on some kind of responsibility internally for like what's happening. And so they don't know anything else. So it is sometimes in those moments, I mean, it's our job to help give that clarity and be like, this has nothing to do with you, right? It's
I
not,
love
this
that.
isn't you, it's me. And that helps them feel better. And they may have some follow-up questions depending on your kid. My kid would have lots of follow-up questions and he would want to know all the details and all the, and sometimes you just have to say like, there's stuff that's just not, it's just not okay for kids to hear. I just want you to know I love you very much. And, I'm going to try and make sure that tomorrow we do something really fun together.
I
And
love that. And I think it's something I need to start practicing, kind of just getting used to saying, Mommy's having a hard day, right? I
yeah.
think giving your kids that understanding can be so crucial.
Mhm.
Helpful. I love that idea, Ashley.
Yeah. Well, because we also want them to, as they get older, tell us when
Learn
they're
that.
having a hard day,
Yep. So it's a
right?
great thing to start teaching
Yeah.
young as you can.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about another hard moment. So what happens if this point in life is hard just because like maternal mental health? Maybe it's kind of going through like the depression and anxiety, all that stuff. It can just feel really hard. Do you have any advice about asking for help or talking through those moments that are really about you, even though they do affect your child?
Yeah. I think asking for help when things get to a certain point, asking for help is a skill that most of us didn't quite develop as kids and adolescents and teenagers. And because sometimes sure, like sometimes life is hard because it's hard. And sometimes life gets hard in ways where maybe there is something more significant going on, like mental health wise with a parent or a child, or developmentally, or something is going on that is making everything feel harder. And so there are times where it's like, I think we might need some help, right? I think I might need to talk to a therapist, or I think we might need to reach out to a pediatrician, or like, I'm worried about this. Maybe it's a marriage counselor, right? Or help could even be like, if you have a hard time asking for people to come over to like watch your kids so that you get some free time,
Yeah. Or
asking for
sleep.
help, right? Like asking for help can be bringing people into your life that alleviates your load a little bit so that you can have some time to yourself or go on a date with your spouse. And so everybody's kind of in these different places along the like, how easy is it to ask for help spectrum?
Yes, and I learned, if you can't see, raising my hand right now, because I learned I'm terrible at asking for help.
I am
And
too.
this was one of the most humbling experiences
Yeah.
going through like the depression part and all that after a kid, because I just felt like I should be self-sufficient. That's how I was kind of raised. And
Yeah.
asking for help is a skill that I'm learning more and more every day.
Yeah, it is. I'm terrible at asking for help. I
Yeah.
remember realizing at one point, either in college or I don't know, something, I had this light bulb moment that was like, oh my gosh, I despise asking for help. I'm like, I just don't like doing it. It doesn't make me feel good. It wasn't until I was older that was like, yes, but it's like necessary and you have to sometimes.
You do. So do you have any advice for people like you and I who are maybe saying, ooh, and you're saying you need to ask for help, and they say, yes, I do. But man, it feels uncomfortable. And man, it's not a skill I know how to do.
Yeah.
Any suggestions there on how to make it easier or to do it for the first time?
Yeah. I mean, depending on the severity. So sometimes, so if people are seeing me as a therapist, then I'm always like,
Mhm.
but hey, you're here.
Yeah.
This is part of that help. So you've already crossed a huge bridge and like you're here. So give yourself a pat on the back for that. Sometimes though, you can start small, right? Get a babysitter or get a babysitter and you're planning every other week. If you normally were like, I don't, I don't think that that this happens a lot where it's like I just feel like I need to take care of my kids all the time and I don't want somebody to come and take care of my kids, or I don't
Yeah.
it's like start with something that feels like an easier yes, right? Or it's like, if you have a family member, is it easier to say, "Hey, mom," or "Hey, mother-in-law, like could you come over and help me with the laundry, or could you come over and do these things?" Like try and pick something that's maybe like slightly lower stakes if it is
Okay.
something you're wanting help with so that maybe you have some more time to yourself or something like that. But
So kind of do the
sometimes
easy ask that there might be a yes, and you can be like, I did that. It helped.
yeah.
That was a check off the belt. Okay.
Because you can build on it. Like once we get
Okay.
on a roll of like little yeses, like then it becomes easier to roll into like a bigger ask of ourselves. And
Okay.
it just, you're kind of building up the momentum. Other times, sometimes we're forced to ask for help, like if there's something that comes up with kids about, you know, developmental issues or concerns or things like that, that somebody notices, sometimes you're forced into it, right? And you do it. And most people realize, oh my gosh, that was so much easier than I thought it was going to be. We hear that all the time from moms, right? Like you work yourself up to finally tell your OB, like, I am not feeling like myself. Like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not feeling like myself. And your OB's like, yeah, no problem. Like, here's a list of referrals to therapists. Let's get you started on some medication. And they do it in this kind of like
No judgment
way, no
Mm-hmm.
judgment way. And a lot of moms are like, why did that seem so much bigger and so much worse, like in my head than it actually was in reality?
And I'm that mom because the amount of times that I've cried at a doctor's office that has nothing to do, but it's just the emotions of letting out the ask of like, I need help or I'm worried about my child, that I just sit there and cry. It's kind of crazy at times, but once it comes out, then you're like, oh, well, that was great. I made it worse than it should have been in my mind.
Yeah. So sometimes you could ask yourself that, like, is it possible that my brain is making this seem like way scarier than it actually is? Or am I like building in some hurdles that really don't need to be there? If you have really good friends, like get your friends involved, right? Sometimes we just need somebody to be like, stop and just go do it, right?
Yes. It's a really great point. And it can even just be anybody you trust, like a family member or somebody, but just that person to be like, I trust your opinion. You're right.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. So we talked about hard moments for kids, hard moments for us, hard moments when things are happening bigger. Ashley, do you have any recommendations on what do we do after these hard moments? Because you've said a lot so far about things we can do in the moment. But what if my child and I had a hard moment this morning? Mommy's having a hard time in life, whatever it may be. And I wasn't the best version of who I wanted to be. I don't like how it feels, like you mentioned. Is there anything I can do after the fact, now that I'm learning some skills that we're talking about, to make it better?
Yeah.
Or if I don't handle it right in the moment, to say, how can I make this better?
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things, we've talked about this a little bit before, but is this whole idea of like reconnect and repair with our kids. And that just means that if you have enough self-awareness to say, this moment didn't feel good. My kid was upset. I'm upset. I've been thinking about this all day and it just doesn't feel good. Then it's our job as the adult to try and do something to fix it. And so for me, what that normally looks like is at bedtime. That's when my kids are calm and we're reading books and, everybody's kind of cozy. And I'll say something to them like, hey, do you remember this morning when, you were having a hard time getting your shoes on and mommy got really frustrated and my voice got really loud. And I think it felt kind of scary to you. And they'll be like, yeah, mostly my older one. Yeah. I'll say, and I know it, I know that doesn't feel good in your body and it probably makes you feel a little bit scared. And it really wasn't okay that was how I reacted. And so next time I'm going to try and take some breaths or maybe go take a break before I come up and talk with you. And sometimes I leave it right there, right? Some days, if, I try not to push it, but some days I'll say, like, whenever I'll ask my son, like, whenever you get really upset, is there anything you feel like, you would do differently? And sometimes he says, like, no. But other times he'll say, like, I can try and listen, or like listening's really hard, but says something that is like he's understanding that there are things that he can do too. But that acknowledgement piece of like, if we handled something in a way that we really didn't feel good about as a parent, can you acknowledge it and own it and let that be a really wonderful lesson for your kid that you want them at some point to be able to acknowledge and own like their behavior.
And I love what you said. Can we break down your script you said? Because I
Mhm.
need it memorized because I'm just going to guess, but a lot of us probably didn't grow up in a generation where your parents constantly kind of said, I'm sorry, maybe I'm going to do this different. So it sounded like first that you acknowledged and on their terms, mommy talked really loud. Like
Yeah.
something a small child, whatever age appropriate is, that mommy did. And then
Yeah.
acknowledging that probably didn't feel good or didn't feel safe or that might have been scary.
Yeah.
And then I think you said, next time mommy's going to do whatever. So instead of raising your voice, mommy's going to walk away for a minute and try to do something different. That wasn't okay.
Yeah. Make it about you, right?
Okay.
What you did, what you could do differently next time. And as hard as it is, like try and leave it at that. Because
Okay.
if I was to come to you, Kelly, and let's say like we got into a fight and I came
Mhm.
and said, you know, I know I said some things that I shouldn't have said today, but you just wouldn't stop talking. You just kept interrupting me. And like I just got so angry and I said some things I shouldn't have said and I'm going to try and do better next time. It's like doesn't
That feels very blamey. It's all my fault then.
yes, doesn't
And it
feel
could
good.
be, but that
Right.
doesn't feel good.
But you're making it someone else's fault. You're not just acknowledging your part of it. And no matter what happens, right, barring certain situations, there's two people, right? Everybody has a part in these hard moments.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to assume like the other person's whatever they feel like was going on in their head, but we can say, this is what I said. Kids do like it when we do try and guess, like if we know they were upset, right? Like if we know they were crying and they were like, why are you so mean to me? You can help them with the words of like, I'm sure like it probably didn't feel good, right? Or that probably felt scary. Or I could tell that after I yelled, you were really upset and that doesn't feel good, right? Like we can give them those words because that is, again, like that's acknowledgement that we saw that they were upset or that we saw that they were really angry. But we're not blaming, right? Or we're not saying, I did this because,
You did this.
right.
You didn't listen to mommy. So
Yeah.
mommy yelled. Yeah.
And because that's the thing, I mean, even between kids, when say like siblings are fighting, is we'll go in and we'll say, like, it's not okay to hit. Like, you guys can't hit each other. Well, but she took my toy and she did this. And parents all the time say, I don't care what happened. We don't hit each other in this family. Right. So
Mhm.
we're already trying to build into them. You don't need to explain or give excuses or reasons. Like, if you did something that is wrong, right, or that a family, family behavior, if you decide that something's not okay, doesn't actually matter why you did it because you did do it. So,
Yeah. You did.
right? Like sometimes, yeah, with me and my kids, it's like it doesn't matter why I was so frustrated. The fact was, I was frustrated. I said something really loudly or I said something in a really strong way, right? AKA, I'll say it, I yell sometimes.
I think
It
every parent
doesn't
has.
feel
Yeah.
good to
It
kids.
doesn't.
It doesn't feel good, and I can acknowledge that, right? It doesn't make it okay, but I'm not gonna lecture them about, like, what they did, not when my goal is to repair,
Yeah.
right? My goal is not to, like, teach them a lesson right now about their behavior and why that was wrong or right or whatever. My goal is to say, "We're okay, and I
I
love
love
you."
that. Yes.
So it's really, really hard for parents to do that. But the more you practice it, right, the lecture and lesson can come later. You can talk about that at a different time. But if the goal is like, I want to end the night on really good terms with my kid and
Mm.
remind them that like we really love and care about each other in this family and that we can talk about things. If that's the goal, then let that guide what you say and how you say it. And it makes a really big difference.
It does. And Ashley, I think this is one of those episodes that we can come back to and listen to over and over again because there are so many hard moments in life, right? For
Yes.
our kids, for us, for seasons of life. It's just hard. It's kind of what life is at times. But getting to say, okay, I have a couple of skills. Let's remember to go have fun with my kids when they're having a bad day. Let them know that. or maybe look and say, is it me? Do I need help? How do I apologize? How do I repair? All of those are just good life skills. And it sounds like from what you're saying, the more we practice this, the more it becomes just part of what we do versus having to remember, did I say kind of a script correctly of,
Yeah.
don't go in and blame, don't do this. Like building that skill and that memory muscle.
Yeah.
All of these could be really helpful.
Yeah. No, exactly. And remembering too that nothing is perfect, right?
Yes.
Everything that I've said, some days I do it and some days I get so dysregulated that I forget, right? And I do get really upset and frustrated. And so this isn't like that every day I'm like, the fairy godmother in my house. Absolutely not. But we in our family have been practicing like this repair process though at night so long that we do almost automatically do it every night in
I
some
love that.
shape or form,
Yeah.
right? It's ingrained in my brain. Like I really would like to end the night on a good note. And then this is just kind of how we end, like in most evenings. Even if we didn't have a hard time, like me or my husband didn't have a hard time with the kids, some days I'll just ask them at school, right? Like, was there anything kind of hard today at school, right? Or does anybody at schools, like, was there anything hard or tricky that you really want to talk about? Just as a way for them to see if there's anything that they need to like get off their chest before bed. But yeah, I mean, it's hard.
It is. And I feel like this generation now, this year, everything just seems a little bit harder. So if you're having a hard week, we're here for you. You can always come back and re-listen to this. Check out some of our older ones if you've got very situational kind of hard things. But we just really wanted to talk about, in general, life can be hard. And here's some things that you can do as a mom or a husband, or really these are kind of good for anybody. Just tips of it will get better. We're here for you. And Ashley, I really hope that your next week and everything coming up is not that hard. I hope it's a little bit less every time.
No, I hope the same thing for you too, Kelly.
Thank you. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, please be sure to hit subscribe, leave us your feedback, and give us a 5-star review. For even more support, visit us at wethrivepostpartum.com/podcast to sign up for our newsletter and learn more about our community. Remember, you are not alone. With support, you can feel better. Together, let's thrive postpartum.